I'm joined here by Jeff Lewis, and I have to say it's a real pleasure to speak to you. I've known you my whole life, and you must hear that from a lot of people.
Well, I do. A lot of people pass through our doors over the years, and one of the things I very much enjoyed about my business was that it wasn't just a business. We had lots and lots and lots of friends, and we we keep tripping over these folks.
That's great. I mean, it really is. I mean, and your motto, your logo on your business card. I always bring this up to people was "We sell everything." And I have to say, you guys did. It was an amazing store that you had. If you went in there for something, you guys had it.
Well, again, that's how we built the business, and we took again a lot of pride in that, and we believed it was true. When I computerized the store, we built into the system 55,000 individual items, which excluded all holiday goods and all promotional goods. So outside of that, just regular everyday items, Rubbermaid, Proctor, Silex, just the regular everyday items. We had 55,000 compared to, for example, a Costco today, which runs about 5,000 items.
Wow. That's amazing.
It was a tough job keeping track of all of those.
Sure. So now let's take it back to the beginning when the store started. So when was that?
It was my grandfather, and it was in the 30s that he had a small store in Brooklyn, and in the 30s he went to Woodhaven and took a single frontage store, about a 20-foot frontage store. The 85th Street store, one little part of that was the original store.
Okay. And so it was the same. It was basically the same kind of store we grew to know. It had all sorts of items, but I guess at some point is when he started expanding it.
That's correct. In the beginning, it was. I wasn't there, but I would imagine it was basic pots and pans and things for the house. And then it was as it was for my grandfather went to his sons, my father and my uncle, and then to their sons, myself and my cousin Robbie. And as each generation went in there, and their personal interests added whole groups of items that the previous generation knew nothing about. And that's how we got into furniture, and that's how we got into lamps and food and pet supplies, and just kept adding on categories.
Wow. So now, talking about your grandfather, when he did he speak to you about the early days and tell you a bit what it was like?
Well, if you've been involved with a family business at all, you have to know that it's a family business is another son or daughter in the family.
Okay.
And we, my brother and I and my cousins, we grew up sharing the household with the business. I mean, my recollection of being in the store goes back into the 40s. I was born in 41, and 45, 46, I was already in the store doing things and setting up displays and toys and whatever. And I don't remember him ever sitting me down and discussing it. I just imagined it wasn't much different from what we were involved in then, except at a smaller level.
Gotcha. So now one of the things about the store was this ability to go in there and get pretty much get anything that you needed. And that's something that was such a valuable the store to have around that could do that. How did you guys pull that off?
Well, we divvied up the buying between a number of people, and we basically bought along our interests. Mm-hmm. For example, I bought all the garden supplies. I bought most of the housewares. I bought the candy. I bought the small appliances, the window decor. My cousin Robbie, he bought the health and beauty aids, the personal care. He bought the notions and the toys. Mm-hmm. So my father was he was the holiday buyer, and each one of us took an area, and that allowed us to concentrate on that area, so that we knew in depth what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so over the years, coming in and out. So you talk about people coming in and out, and familiar faces. But you also had a number of people who worked for you for a long time, and so do you keep in touch with them?
Yeah, we do. Hopefully, at the dinner coming up, we're going to have some of our former employees there. We've talked to them, and they've expressed a desire to come. So hopefully they'll show up. And there is a website that my former employees run, where they keep in contact with one another. Mm-hmm. And I'm constantly hearing about people tripping over people, because truthfully, you can't go very far without tripping over someone who either worked for Lewis's or shopped in Lewis's.
Sure.
I was invited to a dinner in Mount Vernon a few months ago, and I had never met the people, and I was introduced to the woman who had the dinner, and her son and daughter-in-law were there, and they were recently married, and I started talking with them, and where do they live? And they live in Howard Beach, and I said to the fellow, "Oh, you know Howard Beach?" He said, "Oh, no, it was my wife who lived in Howard Beach." And I said, "Oh, you had a shop in Lewis?" She said, "Oh, of course I shopped in Lewis's."
That's fantastic. I mean, it is something in common. I mean, I know when I was on a business trip in Chicago, a couple of years ago, and ran into someone from New York, from Queens, and when I said Woodhaven, the first thing out of his mouth was, "Oh, Lewis Woodhaven." Bam. I mean, it was one of those stores. It was just well now. So at some point now, there was a store in 85th. But you guys expand and open up the store on 91st, and that's another large store that you open up. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, my father and my uncle, they were brothers, and they socially they were inseparable. They did everything together. They shared apartments, vacation places, but in the store they had two very different ideas of how a store could be run, and they ran into difficulty among themselves. So the easiest thing to do was to open another store, and my father ended up in the 90th Street store, and my uncle Julie ended up at the 85th Street store, and that way each one of them could run their stores the way they wanted to, and it showed. It showed in the stores. It showed in the product mix. It showed in the displays. And the crazy thing was that Woodhaven, not the biggest place in the world, yet everybody in Woodhaven had their Lewis's, and you couldn't convince them to shop in the other Lewis's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely so right of it. It's like to me, it's like the one for me. It was the 90th Street one was the one that I was introduced to when I was very, very young, and that was the one that I would go to all the time. And whenever I went to the other one, I always felt out of place. It wasn't my Lewis's, that was the other one. But yet I know people that are just the complete opposite. So you had the two. And your father's name was? I'm sorry.
My father was Larry.
Larry,
and he was in the 90th Street store with myself. And in the 85th Street store was my Uncle Julie and his son Robbie.
And now I'm guessing were they now that they've got two separate stores? Was it competitive between the two stores?
No, not at all. Well, maybe the brothers among themselves thought it to be, but certainly not. I mean, the pricing was the same, and as you know, if you walked into one store and you wanted something and we didn't have it, within 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, somebody would jump into a car and run to the other store, and even if it was a 99-cent item, it didn't make a difference. Get that item and bring it back. So we were there. I mean, basically, we were there to serve Woodhaven, and that's what came first.
Now, you also had across from the 85th Street store, you had the warehouse.
That is correct.
Over there, and I know you're not going to remember this, but it was funny because it came up. I was going to a party, and I won't go into the reasons for it, but I needed a swimming pool, and it was between Christmas and New Year's, and I needed one of the little kiddie pools, and someone was asking around for it, and I said, you know what? I said, let me go down to Lewis's, and I went down there, and I caught you, and I asked you. I said, I'm looking for a little kiddie pool. And you said, now? I mean, because, man, it was about 8 degrees out, and you went across the street, and actually, that was the only time I got into the warehouse. I went in with you. You climbed up on this thing, and you got up there, and you looked down to me, and you said, what color do you want?
Blue or green?
I mean, there it is in the middle. Just what color do you want? It was fantastic. It was a place that absolutely could get everything. So now, time goes on. You've got the two stores. And yet, after a while, you decide to close one of them.
That's correct.
And so now it's consolidated in one, and then eventually you make the tough decision to close. What led you to the decision to finally close?
Well, what happened, and it was kind of interesting because it took me a long time to figure out what was going on, and of course I'll never know. It was never etched in stone. But what I think happened is traditionally Woodhaven was an older neighborhood with lots of older people and a lot of two-family houses, and the kids lived upstairs or downstairs, and the mom and dad lived on the other end, took care of their kids, and it was a very old-fashioned environment, and the people shopped the old-fashioned way. They'd come down to the avenue, and they'd stop in Tony's and buy a quarter pound of bologna for lunch, and come into the store and make a purchase and go home, and then 2 hours later they'd come back out and do a little shopping for dinner, for food possibly, and stop into the store and make a purchase again. And as those people were replaced with the newer people that came in, and I don't think it had anything to do with ethnicity or finances or anything. I just think the newer people came in with newer shopping habits. And that meant going to the mall with their kids so that I guess the kids could destroy the mall while all the parents did their shopping. And the overall traffic on the avenue diminished greatly. And the way we ran our stores, I mean, not only did we have everything, but we sold it relatively inexpensively also. And when you're working on short margins, the only way to make a go of it is to sell a lot of it. And when there were a lot of people on the avenue, we sold a lot of it. And as the number of people diminished on the avenue, we began to see a tremendous squeeze. And you can only squeeze so much until that's it.
Well, I tell you, I mean, there's a lot of people who they look at Jamaica Avenue and see the closure of Lewis of Woodhaven as a tremendous blow, and it's the world changes and you go on. But so speaking of going on, what have you done with yourself the last decade or so since you left?
Well, I only know how to work. I don't know how to not work. So retirement was never in the cards for me. We got into a business where we are supplying institutions and not-for-profit organizations, youth facilities, Catholic charities, Children's Village, CAMBA for the homeless, and we supply them with similar products that we sold, but a much narrower band of goods, toothpaste and toothbrushes and towels, and we pretty much just work out of an office and ship the merchandise from where it's coming from to where it's going.
Okay. Now, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this recently, and it's just coincidence and timing, but the 90th Street location is vacant.
I know. This is the craziest thing. When we closed the store, Eckert came in and opened up their drugstore, and then Eckert was absorbed by Rite Aid. So Rite Aid was in there, but then where Kligman's was, Rite Aid was there also. So Rite Aid decided to close the 90th Street store, but according to the lease, they had an option to rent it to whomever they wanted to, and they did. And so pretty much they were the landlord, and we just kept an eye on things to make sure that it stayed clean and watertight and everything. But they had the master lease, and then these guys just disappeared. I didn't know anything about it. When I saw the sign, I went there and I said, "Let me speak to the manager." Nobody could find the manager. Really weird, really weird. And I was there today trying to come up with some information, and so we have calls out to everybody trying to find out what's going on there. But I really know nothing more than the fact that it's empty, and we have to see what's going to happen with this. Rite Aid is still they still have a lease with us for another 5 years. So I don't know what's at the moment. I don't know what's going to happen.
So the chances of a return of Lewis of Woodhaven, it's not really in the cards. That's
not in the cards.
Okay.
No, there's no reason for me to believe that things have changed any. Even though Woodhaven is looking quite well at the moment. It's clean. It's neat. There's a few vacancies. It looks to me like it's in good shape. But it's a different world, my kind of store, and I don't know why. I don't know why Woolworths had to give up, but people they just don't seem to want. Even though everybody wants it, they don't want it.
Sure. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. Like I said, we all for everyone who grew up in Woodhaven, you mentioned that the store was part of your family. It was part of our family too. And coming to the store and being there, all the familiar faces. When I run into people there that I used to work across the street at Phil's Cheese and Cold Cuts.
Okay.
So a lot of people came in there for lunch, and you just knew people over the years, and it was one of those periods of local employment too. I mean, that's one of the things that was, where when you went into a store, it was your neighbors. That you were waiting on.
We had a couple of instances where we employed 3 generations from the family. 3 generations from the family. And there were many where the 2 generations were I had a cashier, Minnie McNamara. You might have remembered her. She was the cashier that was at the register closest to Phil. She was a tall, older, slight woman.
Okay, yeah.
And she worked there for many years. And so that was Minnie McNamara. And then her daughter, Mary, worked for me for many after her mother died. Mary worked for us for many years. And we were just so close to so many of the families in Woodhaven. I mean, I had so many times I'd get a call from Mr. Lewis, I'm locked out of my house, what should I do? or I'm locked out of my car, what should I do? Or this isn't working, we were there for, I can't find my son, have you seen him? And we were there for all of that. And I loved it. I really did.
That's great. Well, listen, I want to thank you for spending time with us, and we look forward to seeing you on October 10th.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.